Sweet.
Okay, so we are actually streaming live right now. So as soon as I see us pop up on the 30 plus group, I'm going to transfer the 30 plus page. I'm going to transfer us over into the group so that all the girls over there can watch as well. So bear with me.
Awesome.
Hi guys, sorry, you just have to wait for just a little wee second because I'm just trying to transfer this over into the group as well. So yeah, I think I've got it right here, so it won't be a second. Come on, Facebook, play nicely today. Okay, I can see our meeting, so let's see if I can share it over into the group. Oh, I've shared it to my profile, haven't I? Great. Oh, well, so everybody on my personal profile is going to be watching. Whoopsie daisy. Okay, well, we'll share it over to the group at another time because otherwise I don't know how we're going to get it there. They've changed all the options and everything. So here we go.
Oh, Facebook.
Okay, good old Facebook. Okay, I'll get rid of that. Okay, hi. All right. So at least we know we're on the page. At least we know somebody's watching. They've changed all the options and everything. So here we go.
Oh, Facebook.
Okay, good old Facebook. Okay, I'll get rid of that. Okay, hi. All right. So at least we know we're on the page. All right. Such a professional. I can tell you we're freestyle.
So professional. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll cut out the front bit when we place it on YouTube. Coming along. This is Sarah Curtis, everybody, from Sarah Curtis Mortgages, is it? It is, eh?
Yes.
Sarah
Very original.
Yes, it is rather. But that's what we want to, we want to be able to find you online. So it's quite a lot easier when you've got your name.
Definitely.
So you're based in Northland, so you're a mortgage broker in the Northland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So based in Kirikiri, but we have clients throughout New Zealand because obviously the whole Zoom connections made life a whole lot easier. So yeah, but our actual office is in Kirikiri.
Okay, so so you're so very familiar with the troubles of Northlanders trying to get into their own homes up there, and I know that even though it's hard for Northland, it is actually hard everywhere now. When I first connected with you, it was literally a couple of years ago now, and I was actually I need to move out of Auckland because I can't afford to buy a house here. So we were in this discussion, we were chatting about that, and that got put on hold for the time being. But meanwhile, it's actually gotten harder and harder to acquire your first home. So there are different kinds of grants and things available for first home buyers, but it's been made so awkwardly almost impossible to be able to activate those grants, isn't it? So
it really has, yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I guess, kind of relating back to what you were saying, where being a first home buyer anywhere in New Zealand is incredibly tough in the moment. And I use Northland as an example because obviously it's a market that I'm dealing with daily. And we have seen a lot of growth from people who a couple of years ago were in exactly the same position that you were in, looking around Auckland and thinking, I can't afford anything here. So moving out into the regions. So that has had an impact in the regions as well. So if we're looking at the prices in Northland, if we're looking over maybe the last 10 years, I would say the property prices have at least doubled. So I haven't got all the stats and stuff in front of me. But when you're looking at a house that was 350,000, that's now 700,000. That's a massive increase. And we haven't seen increases in wages over that time to keep up with that. Rents have increased. So most of the time when you're a first home buyer, you're renting while you're looking to buy your home. So that's increased, which has reduced how much you can actually save towards buying your first home. So the goalposts were just constantly shifting. So what we were really hoping that with this announcement around the grant, so just to kind of clarify, with KiwiSaver, if you're going to withdraw your money out of KiwiSaver, as long as you're buying your first home, you can take your money out of your KiwiSaver fund as long as you meet that criteria. There's no price limits, there's no restrictions, anything like that. So we're specifically talking about the first home buyer's grant. Now in Northland to buy, you were having to buy an existing property under $400,000. And I think when I had a look about 2 weeks ago, when we first launched the petition, there were maybe 10 houses in the whole of Northland that would fit within a bank's lending criteria to buy under $400,000. So I would have more than 10 people on my books that are looking to, that are pre-approved and ready to buy. No one is kind of, everyone's fighting for those houses. If you were going to be buying land and building, it had to be a total package under $500,000. So you were having to kind of find land for $200,000 and then have a build contract for $300,000. And even that is just so completely unrealistic. So when the announcements, you go.
So how old are these grants? Like, when were these grants set?
Oh my gosh, I think they were set when we were looking at everything. There was a change around 2013 where there was a minor increase, but really nothing has been looked at that kind of length of time. So it's been a really, really long time. And in 2015 also, the bank had a lot of changes around the responsible lending code. So their policies changed around what they could lend to people too. So we saw a tightening in the criterias from the banks, which kind of compounded the problem a little bit. And also, when you're applying for a mortgage, the bank figures out how much you can afford based on a test rate. And that test rate at the moment is sitting at around 6.5%. Well, we know that as a mortgage, even if you're borrowing kind of 90%, which is the maximum that you can borrow, you can be paying interest rates in the threes. So the banks are making sure that they're really, really, really comfortable with your level of affordability before they're giving you these mortgages. It's just the deposit side of things that people are really, really struggling with.
Actually, that's another question I had for you, and it's a little bit off topic, but most of these people who are trying to afford a home loan have been paying rent all of their lives, all of their adult lives, and probably all of their teenage lives often as well. These people have proven records of being able to pay huge amounts of rent and increasing amounts of rent. So how is it that a bank can decide what your affordability is when people have shown that they've got a good credit rating, they've never missed a payment, they've always found a way to make their end? How do they work that?
So they pull it back to that whole responsible lending code. So when I first started lending, those were the things that we would use to mitigate the fact that someone could afford it. And that's what we would tell you to do. If you came in to have a consultation and said, I wanted to buy a house in 6 months' time, my rent is $300 a week, and we would calculate it and say, okay, well, your mortgage is going to be $500 a week. So you need to be putting aside that difference of $200 to show that you can afford that mortgage payment. At the moment, if we're putting information into the bank's calculators and it does not pass those calculators, it's incredibly tough, even if we can prove that you can make those payments, to get a mortgage at that level.
So it's just really, really tricky in general. Forget about the house caps.
Really tricky.
Okay, so let's talk about the house caps. And so in different areas of New Zealand, there are different caps and different levels. So what are you about those?
So basically at the moment, when everything got reviewed a couple of weeks ago, and this is crazy, nothing's actually changed again. They moved some of the caps. So I think in New Zealand, in Auckland, they moved at $50,000, which is just nothing. It's barely scratching the surface of things. So the petition that we've launched is actually just to completely scrap the housing price caps. So they've got income price caps, which they increase. So I think for an individual, it's 95,000, and I can't remember off the top of my head, potentially 150,000 for a couple that you can earn together. So what we're saying is that if you've saved a deposit and you meet those income caps, you're not over those income caps, then it should not matter the value of the property that you're buying. So if you've worked really hard and you've got you've gone and saved $100,000 and you want to buy a $700,000 house, we don't think that should disqualify you from being able to access that first home buyer's grant. We think that your hard work should be rewarded and that you should be able to qualify for that $5,000 each from the government. So we've asked for that price cap to just be completely removed all around New Zealand.
Yeah. So speaking of a government, do you think that we have, like, who is it that actually makes these rules? Because at this point, what it looks like from outside looking in is this government is completely disconnected with the average everyday New Zealander. And if they really, really honestly think that, you know, you can actually, you know, like you said, purchase a house at that price, you know, how, or just reach the level of affordability to get into a home, you know, what planet are these people on? Who's in the government? I do feel a little bit, I feel a little bit frustrated and stressed actually, because mainly we're in such a huge housing crisis and epidemic as it is. And, you know, as you know, lots of home owners who own rentals are selling up, and we've just got to this conundrum where people can't rent anymore. The rents are going up. They can't find somewhere to buy that's affordable. The house caps aren't cutting it for us. Everybody, it feels like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Who do you need to talk to?
So I think this is a big part of the problem is it doesn't seem like anyone is listening to the people on the ground. And this is where I kind of got to the point where I was so frustrated. We had reached out to MPs, we'd reached out to different people to try and be having a conversation to say, we're literally talking to people daily who are telling us what they need. Why is no one listening? So the petition was kind of the amount of frustration, and my husband and my business partner will tell you that I just get to the point where I'm like, this is ridiculous. And that night I was just hammering the keyboard like, this has to stop. Someone has to listen to the people who know what they're talking about, to the people who are talking to the people on the ground, because no one is listening. And through the course of doing some research around the petition and things, which maybe I should have done before the petition, but I fired out and got the petition out there. I've seen, you know, there's information that we've got through the Official Information Act, that there are reports from the Ministry of Housing saying there are not enough people accessing these grants. We have more money available. We need to do something to change this. And it's just not getting through, you know. So if we're not listening to experts.
Okay. Yeah, so their hands are tied as well. So who do they need to get? Who needs to listen to them?
Yeah, it's really, really frustrating. So the petition, obviously we want to get some traction around it. We want to make sure that, you know, we can kind of get these grants removed, and the whole other side with things around the restrictions around trying to build are really important. But the main thing is really to use this to generate a conversation to say, this cannot continue. And you can't come out and say that you're supporting first home buyers as this token headline with no substance behind it. It's just not going to cut it anymore.
It does actually, though. That's the perfect description, a token headline. I'm actually thoroughly sick of hearing how we just want the best for our New Zealanders, and we want them in homes, and we want them into healthy homes. And, you know, actually the people on the ground, like you said, the frustration is, you know, our hands are tied every which way we turn to try and get into housing. So with this petition, what do you think that you can achieve by getting, and how many signatures do you need to get it listened to?
I don't know, they kind of can't give us any guidelines around signature amounts and that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit tricky. There doesn't seem to be, you know, if you get to 1,000 signatures, then this is what that means. So really, we just want to get the word out around generating a conversation around what people actually need and what people think we can do to help. Some people completely disagree with me. So there'll be some advisors who say, well, if you're going to go give first home buyers money, then all that's going to mean is that there's more first home buyers out there fighting for the properties. I think that's good. Yes. You know, I would rather see first home buyers fighting with other first home buyers to try and get properties than first home buyers fighting with investors. I think there are places in New Zealand where things are a little bit different. So we've got, you know, Christchurch, for example, there will be more people who have been able to qualify for these grants because they've had to rebuild literally the city. So, you know, you could qualify for this grant if the house was built in the last 12 months. So Christchurch is not a benchmark to be using for these statistics. We really need to know what's happening in the rest of New Zealand and be having a conversation around the rest of New Zealand around how to support first home buyers, because saying, well, you know, oh, first home buyers, oh, they can move out to the regions. Well, that's pushing up prices in the regions, and not everyone wants to live in the regions.
Mm. But actually, in fact, and I recall seeing this on one of your previous posts, you know, because you're based in Northland and your heart is for the people of Northland, predominantly, really. And, you know, but what you're seeing happening is people who are in Auckland who would like to stay in Auckland, ideally, but they are being pushed, like you said, into the regions, and they actually don't have a choice. If they want to own their own home, they actually have to go and reinvent themselves, and they're going north. And by doing so, like you said, driving up prices, and also really just cutting out those people who have been saving for years to get into their first home in Northland, where they've lived all of their lives, where they want to continue to live, but they're being pushed out by just, for example, Aucklanders who have nowhere else to go. So is this a part of the driving up of the general prices of property as well all over New Zealand, is it?
Yeah, I think definitely. So if you think about how it kind of used to be in Northland, so your entry level kind of price was, you know, $400,000, $500,000, for example. Then your next level type of house was kind of in the $700,000, $800,000. And then you got your premium type properties. So what we used to have is you'd buy your first house, you'd get on the ladder, and then you would upgrade to your next level of property. And what we're finding is people moving in from other regions. It's not just Auckland, you know, we've got people from Christchurch, we've got people from Nelson, we've got people from all other places coming to our region because it is beautiful and it's amazing. But they're buying in that next level of house. You know, they're buying those $700,000-$800,000 houses. So those first home buyers who now want to sell their properties to get to the next step of the ladder, which would free up normally those first homes for the new buyers to come in, they're not buying their next level because there aren't enough properties there. So they're staying in their home, you know, that first tier, and actually they're like, well, let's, you know, get a new kitchen and let's build a deck and let's do these things. So then they're pushing their homes into that next bracket as well. So we just don't have the supply coming in. And particularly up here, the builders and, you know, the subdividers and everyone that's going out there to do things, they can make more money building homes in that next bracket than they can for those first home buyers. So there's no incentives for them to be building anything in the first home buyer bracket. If you can build for, you know, $500,000-$600,000 and sell it, but then you can build for $800,000-$900,000 and sell it, you know which one you're going to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. So in the same kind of conversation, do you think that the new legislation, the new laws for property investors, has that helped or has it hindered buyers, the buying process?
I don't think we've seen the full impact of it yet. It's still actually not even being made law. So I feel like it was kind of just to like chuck it out there and see if it kind of dampens the housing market and see what happens. And we need to remember, even if it becomes law, it will be phased in over the next 4 years. So the conversations that we were having with people when COVID hit are very much the same kind of conversations that we're having now. Is we've never had this happen before. We don't know what it's going to do to the market. But what we do know is there are not enough houses for the people that want to live in the areas where people want to live. So it's basic economics. If you don't have enough supply, you have too much demand, the prices are going to go up.
So what's your suggestion for going forward to, you know, to obviously increase the supply so that we can keep the houses on a level where people can get into their first homes, apart from just dropping the cap, obviously, which is big. What else is your suggestion?
Yeah, so we know that the dropping the cap is not going to be the silver bullet. We know that we need to help drive that supply. So there's a couple of different things that we think that potentially the government or the banks could look at. So one of those things is, I don't know if any of you remember back in the 80s, I know when my parents bought their house, they actually only had a 5% deposit and they had a second tier type lender who lent them the 15%. And that was at a higher interest rate and it was over a shorter term. So a standard bank would lend you the 80%, then another lender would provide you with that extra little bit, and it was your goal to pay that 15% off as quickly as you could to build that equity back into being your equity. So if there was some kind of scheme, you know, kind of like how the old welcome home loan scheme was meant to work but didn't seem to kind of play out either, to support people getting into their homes, it wouldn't mean that people were mortgaged up to the hilt. You know, there's this whole thing of young home buyers being burdened with these massive mortgages. A lot of what we do as advisors around structuring debt to make sure that it is affordable and about making sure that it fits within your circumstances. first home buyers are, the next thing that they're looking about is potentially having children or potentially being self-employed, or all those changes. So having really robust conversations with people in the first place around their future goals is something that we need to be encouraging, and not kind of having a disincentive around that. The next thing that we need to be doing is really having some good conversations about properties like relocatable dwellings. Trying to get a mortgage on a relocatable dwelling at the moment is incredibly tough. Unless you have a lot of equity in your land to be able to afford to get that relocatable dwelling onto your house, then it's really not something that a first home buyer is going to be able to do. And a lot of the time, the first home buyers that we see that can do it need help from their parents. And that's just not realistic for a lot of people. So we need to increase the supply by having conversations around getting, those extra things like the relocatable dwellings and those livable sheds. Lots of people that we talk to are quite happy to live in tiny homes and things like that.
That's a big thing at the moment. I mean, it's because really, what other options do they have at the end of the day? Sometimes, what's a tiny home? $80,000 to $100,000, and they can happily live there on a bit of land. And is that an option for people? Even though I don't think that's the best option, but is that an option? Is that what people are they managing to do that?
There's no one at the moment that we will find that can get support to build a tiny home unless it's piled into the ground and it's like that right from the start. So it's incredibly limiting. But, and I guess in Auckland, you can say you can get into the bracket by starting to look at buying an apartment or something like that. But in the regions where we don't have, those kind of apartments and things like that, tiny homes, we have lots of clients that we speak to that are really happy to live in, consented sheds. They're not that stressed about it at all.
So in Auckland, you can't really do the tiny home thing. You really have to kind of relocate out of Auckland with a tiny home. I haven't seen anywhere where anybody in any sort of nice urban area has been able to plop a tiny home anywhere. So that just, again, that drives people out of the region and into the other regions. And so it's still the same conundrum, isn't it? It's not really, it's not really helping, making, forcing people into a situation where they have to buy tiny homes. Talk to me though about, the massive buying swell, which I didn't expect to happen, but I'd literally just spent 4 hours listening to a property investment webinar a couple of weekends or a few weekends ago, and now they've literally had to restructure their whole webinar because it actually isn't even relevant anymore. But people, now what's my point? My actual point.
It all changed overnight.
Yeah, everything just changes. But these people are buying houses right now at maxed out prices, like houses that went for, I've seen houses sell for 700,000 2 years ago and people flipping them for $1 million 2 years later. So now these people who are buying at $1 million, and then when the interest rates change again and then they can't afford them, are we going to see more houses freed up from people who actually really just can't afford their mortgages anymore? How's that looking?
I don't think so, because especially if they're borrowing from the banks, they're already being tested at that higher test rate. And as an investor, the bank scales your rental income anyway. So if you're getting paid $500 a week in rent, the bank doesn't take that whole $500. They scale that down to 75% of it. So when they're lending to these investors, they're not kind of borrowed to the max, and any little change is not going to be factored into anything. Any savvy investor will be working closely with their accountant to be making sure that everything's kind of juggled. And to be fair, a lot of the times when those interest rates do flip, that's when we see rental increases.
So it's actually not helping anybody at all, and there's not going to be an influx of houses to buy in another year. Or
I don't think so.
I had actually heard some people who follow property markets saying, just wait 12 to 36 months and then we'll have a whole lot of property to buy. But it's not looking like that, is it?
I don't think so, no. And the other hard thing is what we're going through is not just a New Zealand problem. Like if you're looking at buying a house in Sydney, if you're looking at buying a house in New York, when we're looking at these big main centres, the prices just consistently increase. So we need to be talking around how to support people to buy homes rather than make it harder for people that already have them.
Yeah. Right, so with the petition in mind, who do we need to get that petition to?
Everyone. So one of the things that I've heard over the weekend was lots of people saying, well, we're not first home buyers, so why do we need to sign it? Everyone who knows someone, if you're not a first home buyer, you'll remember how hard that journey was. If you are a first home buyer, then you're really going to know how hard that journey is. So it's just really about having conversations with people around how tough you feel. I think that people who have been through it kind of forget a little bit of that potential trauma. And you kind of breathe because you're out the other side of it. And if you're thinking, the difference in Northland that will make from getting another $10,000, if you have a great income, you have a solid credit history, everything like that, it could take you from buying a $400,000 house to a $500,000 house. That's the kind of differences that we're talking about. And the same in Auckland, if you've got a $70,000 deposit, you add that $10,000 into it, that gets you up to being able to borrow up to $800,000. It's a complete different bracket of property. So I think that anyone that knows that struggle, anyone that you can get to support the petition will be great. And really, it is a mechanism that we're trying to use to generate a conversation to make sure that first home buyers' voices are heard.
Mm-hmm. So once this petition is signed, it's now it's only got a week and a bit left on it, hasn't it?
Yeah, so next Friday is cut-off date, last day of April.
Yeah, and then what do we do with that petition once it's all hit the cut-off deadline?
So once it's all put together, then I'm pretty sure the next step, it gets packaged up and it gets delivered to select committee, if memory serves me right. And then they will have a discussion on it from there. So it's kind of getting it to that next step of things. Our conversation around it all won't stop kind of once the petition is signed. We still want to be hearing from people with their struggles. We want to be making sure that people are also having the right kind of conversations. Lots of times we'll talk to people and they say, oh, I rang the bank and they told me I can't do this, or I talked to my friend's mum and she said there's no point till I have 20%. Make sure that you're engaging with an advisor who can really know your personal circumstances, because there are ways that things can happen. It's just about, we always say, and I know that I've said to you before too, that it's about when you will buy your first home, not if. Mm-hmm. So it's about making sure that you have that support and that backing around it all.
Yeah. So that's your job, isn't it? You're the advisor. You're the one who people go to find out all the loopholes and all the nooks and crannies that they can dive into to find out how to secure that first home for themselves. So you are predominantly in Northland, but you do sort of help up and down New Zealand, and you are very much online. Your business is very a lot online now, isn't it? So people can follow you on Sarah Curtis Mortgages on Facebook, is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
I'm going to pop some links up to your Facebook and also to your petition so that we can try and get the message out there for everybody. I mean, because this isn't just about us and people who want to buy their first home. This is also about our children and, and the generations to follow. What are we going to do if we don't actually, make some traction here and now? Is it going to be that none of us ever own a home after this generation? So I think it's really important to be well advised on what you can get. Okay, so Sarah, thank you so much for joining us and having a chat with us.
Thank you.
Pop your links up and hopefully we get to have another talk maybe even after the petition ends so that we can see what difference that made. And I'll just send people your way. I'll just put your links up and
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you so much. It's been so awesome to catch up.
Also, okay, so we'll chat real soon. I'm just going to finish this live right now so that, okay, bye guys, bye.